Right, good afternoon everybody. I'm joined today by our Education spokesperson Nicola Willis MP. I'm also joined by Dale Stevens, our candidate in Christchurch Central, and I've got here as well Dr. Nicholas Campbell, who's a virologist, but actually he's also our candidate in Wigram. So lovely to have you here, and we're very pleased to be here at this particular Teachers College to be able to announce what I think is the best education policy that I have seen in my years in politics. And I say that because it deals with the very real needs of children, with teachers and their parents. It is really important that we understand that children going through our educational system should expect to have a decent education, and they should be able to expect to have qualifications such as, at the very minimum, NCEA level 2, so that they can get into apprenticeships and to be able to find jobs. That is absolutely crucial. Our record in government was that we put a huge emphasis on particularly Māori and Pacifica children who had been well down the statistics when it came to achievements in NCEA level 2. We saw the increases up to of 20% of children increased were in getting NCEA level 2 for both Māori and Pacifica. That is a massive increase. What we've seen in the current government after a couple of years is that those levels have started to drop back again. That is not something they should be proud of, but it is something that we are proud of, that we were able to bring about through a real focus on what matters for children and their education, that we were able to help bring up those numbers of children who are leaving school with qualifications to enable them to have a career post-school. What is really important too is that we focus on the fact that we need more primary school teachers. We are very much of the view that with our big infrastructure spend on education, $4.8 billion for repairing classrooms and new classrooms, that we also need to have teachers to cope with the fact that the school-age population is increasing, but also because we know that children and their parents and their teachers all prefer to have more teachers than we have now in those classrooms. So we are committing to an extra 2,000 primary school teachers in our classrooms. This is a massive increase, and I would expect that every parent, every child and every teacher will be saying that National understands education. We understand what it's like to be a parent, particularly of a child at school who is maybe struggling. We understand what's needed, and we understand that that's what's expected. We also are putting a big increase in support for children with additional learning needs. And these are children who, at the moment, depending on the school and depending on the teacher, can get left behind. And left behind when there's no need for them to be left behind. Because what we're wanting to do, and we are committing to, are 600 extra hours of teacher aid help in the classrooms. That's going to really help schools. We're putting a big emphasis on being able to give schools better resources to be able to assist these children to reach their potential. But we're also saying that we know that there are some schools where children with additional learning needs feel more welcome, are more able to succeed than other schools. And we know that that is one of the issues that I deal with most in my electorate in education, is to be able to deal with the fact that quite a few children, quite a large proportion, do have additional learning needs, and some feel unwanted at their school. So rather than making this a problem for the child or for the parent, we're going to give the parent some choice when it comes to the school zoning. So we're not going to be the rigid Labour government on this. We're going to say, if your child has additional learning needs and you believe that it's best interest of your child with those special learning needs to be able to go to another school where they are more welcome and they are wanted and they feel wanted, then we're going to let you do that. It's a bit of freedom. And by the way, it's got a great reason for us doing it. Now I'm going to come to partnership schools. Partnership schools was another one of the great successes of a national-led government. And Labour came into office, they said they didn't like partnership schools, they got rid of them, and they called the ones that they left special character schools. We know the partnership schools. We want to make sure that we celebrate partnership schools and what they can do for young children, young people, particularly those who are in fact left out of the education system and are not well catered for. I've seen them working in my electorate. I'm sure many of us have seen them working. They work really, really well. And so what we're going to be doing is we are going to aspire to have 25 new partnership schools, at least 25, in the first 3 years of government. And these schools will be chosen on the basis of what they do around for Pacifica and Māori children, what they can specially do for Pacifica and Māori children, what they can do for children with special learning needs. If they want to specialise in that, we want to talk to them. And we also want to say, and very importantly for our economy, because this is why education is so important for everybody, is that it drives our economy, it drives productivity, it drives our country, is that those schools who want to specialise in STEM subjects such as science, technology, engineering and maths, those partnership schools will, along with the other two categories I've stated, get preference. And that's because we need to grow our STEM subjects, our love of technology, engineering, maths and science, and we need to make it available for every child to understand just how wonderful this area is. We are also going to be, with obviously the extra teachers, it's going to obviously lower the class sizes of for primary school students, but we're also lowering the ratio of adults to children in our early childhood centres for those who are under 2 years old. We've been to see them, we understand from the sector, we understand from parents that this is needed, and that, as we all know, those of us who have ever been a parent know, and we're always a parent once we are one, that under twos need a lot more time and attention than over twos, and it is really important that we put some extra effort in there, and so we have committed to that today. So we are very much focused on performance for our children, performance in the classrooms, and actually an economy that's growing, and it's really important that we get education right, because under the current part-time Minister of Education, what we're seeing is a return to the future, a return to big unionism, big focus on what big government wants, and actually a stifling of individuality and excellence. We want to promote excellence, and one of the best ways of doing it is let kids do what works well for them and give parents a say. So there we are. That's pretty much it. I've got Nicola for any detailed questions, but I'm happy to support this policy as the best education policy I've ever seen in my years in Parliament.
What do you make of the alert level move today?
Actually, the alert level moves are starting to look very political. We can see here in the South Island alert level 2 again. We're starting to wonder very much, because we don't get the same advice, obviously, that the Prime Minister has, and she doesn't share it, that these decisions are increasingly being made by government, cabinet, rather than by based on health or anything else. We have no reason to believe otherwise. I'm feeling they're starting to get a bit political, and I'd like the Prime Minister to front up and tell us exactly how those decisions are made and how they differ or not agree with the advice that they're getting.
And how tough is it for the country to endure lockdown a little longer?
Well, it's not just tough for the country. I think everyone feels that they're trying to do their best to comply with rules and regulations, and I'm sure everyone's trying their best. But we'd just like a government to actually get their act together. And we're seeing it now with the situation of no decisions made except we just won't make a decision. And that's what we're seeing from the leader of the Labour Party, very much the sort of too frightened to do anything, so does nothing. I think it's really important that people also understand that our country is losing jobs every single day. And that's actually really hard for people. You know, I just look at some of the families that I deal with in my electorate in Papakura, and there's a whole lot of people who have lost their jobs through no fault of their own. And they're sitting around wondering, like people here in Christchurch, and saying, well, hang on, what did we do wrong? And the answer is they didn't do anything wrong. So I just really think it's really tough for people. I know people all try and do their best. Everyone wants to be safe. But tell you what, I'm really worried about what's coming down the track for the economy. I'm really worried for New Zealanders.
You spent the day travelling around Christchurch, walking around. Do you feel like this is a place that needs to be in level 2 conditions at the moment?
Well, for me, I mean, obviously, I'm not the health professional, but I can tell you this: I haven't met too many people here who think it should be. You know, obviously, I think people are trying to comply very much with masks for public transport or in very enclosed conditions. I see no problem with that. I see no problem with hand washing and hygiene. I see no problem with COVID apps and contact tracing. I think most people would agree that those are good things to do. But I also know that this is a huge, it's having a huge effect economically on Christchurch and the rest of the South Island.
What do you make of the fact New Zealand First has invoked the agree to disagree provision of the coalition agreement over the rest of New Zealand continuing in alert level 2?
Well, they're obviously following us, and that's probably not a bad thing.
What do you mean by that, following you?
Well, I think it's very clear is that this is now a political decision that we're seeing, and people, if the Deputy Prime Minister is sitting and hearing the same advice as the Prime Minister, I think they might want to be asked why it is that they have differing views, what they're basing it on.
And how much bearing do the alert levels have on the campaign?
Well, obviously they stifle the opportunity to have public meetings before the campaign. Before the last lockdown, the yo-yo into lockdown again, we were having public meetings of 450 people, big public meetings, and suddenly we can't. In Auckland, campaigning is reduced to essentially handing out pamphlets and delivering pamphlets and doing things on social media because there's only 10 people in a room. So it's very tough. But you know what? We just keep going. Going gets tough, the tough keep going. So we do.
And do you think the South Island should be lifted to alert level 1?
I've seen no reason why it would be where it is at the moment. But I do have no problem with people using masks and hand washing hands, all those sorts of things. I think most people would think that was a good thing to do.
How concerned are you by the prospect of an All Blacks game distracting voters on election day?
You know what I'm really concerned with is the fact that our government stuffed up the Sansa rugby and we're probably going to lose the Bledisloe Cup hosting as well because they couldn't organise themselves. We had on the one side the Australians able to work out how to make things work, and we have our government incapable of understanding how to make something work. I'm not surprised by that. I'm just constantly floored that other people ever think that these guys could do anything. I mean, I'm just disgusted by it, that they can't get rugby games here because they can't even organise how the Australians are doing it. I mean, why is it that the Warriors are playing in Australia, for instance? We know why, because the other teams can't come here and all that. And yet they can play there, they can play games. And in New Zealand, we're sitting around losing the Sansa Rugby Championships because our government couldn't make any concessions other than one in 3 weeks. And then the Prime Minister went off and blamed the rugby union and the Sansa politics. And the rugby union's been very clear. It's not Sansa politics, it's Labour Party politics.
The prospect of that game, though, on election day, does that concern you at all?
No, I just hope if New Zealand's playing, we win. Because I back New Zealand 100%.
You're not worried it will be a distraction?
I think it'll probably remind everybody that this particular government let everyone down when it came to the Sansa rugby tournament.
How confident are you in Upper Harbour candidate Jake Bezant?
It's Bezant. I think he's fine, actually.
And then with today's announcement, why the focus on teacher aides and learning support?
Well, if anyone knows anything much about children with special learning needs, particularly if they've got things like on the autism spectrum or ADHD or anything like that, it actually often takes teacher aides to help children to learn how to do certain things and what's expected of them. So we can have, for instance, children with very high IQ who often lack some EQ, but need someone to give them a hand to show them how to do things, and in many ways to translate things like body language into words for people. These are really valuable people in the teaching world, and I know that we're backing the right people.
On the student aid number, you know, increasing the hours that student aids, for teacher aids, and then also
Yeah.
increasing, you know, changing the ratios between teachers and early childhood centres. What's the national-led government going to do to make sure that that teaching resource is there to be able to fulfil that policy?
Well, we are very ambitious to lower class sizes, to lower ratios in early learning and to increase the number of teacher aides. So we will be supporting our tertiary training providers to both attract and train new teachers, but also supporting schools and early childhood services to retain their existing workforce. COVID does present some opportunities, and we're hopeful that more people will want to enter teaching.
The funding for teacher aides equates to about an additional one part-timer per school when 1 in 5 kids has additional needs. Is that enough?
Well, it's one small part of our policy. We have the additional funding for teacher aides and then an additional bulk fund for every school, and we expect many schools will choose to use that funding as well for additional teacher aid hours. It's $160 million per year. It's a big boost for our schools.
And will you make learning to do compulsory in schools?
No, what we're wanting to do, and we're very focused on, is making sure that every child has an opportunity to learn a second language. We believe that many schools will wish to make te reo the second language that the children learn, and in some cases, obviously, as the party that really very much focused on kahanga reo, that we will want to make, and some will want to make it obviously the first language as they do now. So I think it's about giving children opportunities, and it's also about understanding that children won't take the opportunities unless they're there.
And will you change New Zealand's official name to Aotearoa?
Not when I'm the Prime Minister. It's New Zealand, and I'm very happy to have it also called Aotearoa, but I am very focused on New Zealand and New Zealanders, but through a COVID-19 massive recession. And I just think we just focus on the economy, and we get on and get people into work, and we build a future.
Would you ever want to make Te Reo Māori a core subject? I know Greens, for example, is wanting to make it a core subject.
The Greens.
Year 10.
Well, it's something that would may be changed in the future, but right at the moment, we're dealing with the policy we have today.
Just back to your Upper Harbour candidate, his business reputation has been challenged in the Business Desk article. Have you spoken to him about that?
Yes, I have, and I'm also aware that the National Party received similar comments back in June, before I was the leader. They investigated it, and they came to the same conclusion as the new CEO of the Parking Sense company, and that is that the matter was a commercial matter, it was dealt with, and there was nothing else in it.
Exactly what comments did the party receive? What are you referring to?
Well, I wasn't actually the leader at that stage, but they already discussed, very similar to what was in the business desk.
Can you recap what you understand from
No,
that
I'm not
receipt?
going to, it's in the business desk.
Nicola, you said about the bulk funding being able to be used for teacher aiding hours. What are some other examples of how that bulk funding could be used?
Professional development, where teachers have a child who presents with a particular additional need. They may want to undertake some new training to best teach that child. Resources, children with sensory challenges often require different resources in the classroom. It may be that teachers want to access a particular course or a particular set of supports for that child. It will vary from school to school. Key to this policy is we trust schools and we trust teachers to know what their students need.